Welcome to the Silver Creek Insights podcast. I'm your host, Felisa Wiley. Today, we're joined by Tristan Handy, founder and CEO of DBT Labs, the company behind the beloved open source tool that redefined analytics engineering. Tristan's journey from early startup roles to pioneering the modern data stack is one marked by community first values and a product led approach that scaled into an industry movement. Let's dive in. Tristan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's been a long time coming, I would say. Reflecting on your early career, from consulting roles to positions at startups like Squarespace and RJ Metrics, how did these experiences shape your vision for DBT Labs and influence your approach to building a product-centric company?
That's a big question. I will say that the prior 7 years of my career, just before starting what was at the time Fishtown Analytics, were spent in leadership roles at early stage companies. And some of them went well, like Squarespace. Some of them went okay, like RJ Metrics, and one of them went much less well. I think that everybody needs to have the experience of being in a failed startup. It's very character building. But I was a little burnt out at the end of those 7 years. Anybody who has worked at an early stage venture-backed company can probably identify with the fact that it is pretty all-consuming. I think 12-hour days was just kind of like a norm. Like that was not an exceptional week. That was just like a normal week. And I was in my mid-30s. I was recently married. I was imagining having kids at some point, and I wanted to have some level of control over my time and my life that I didn't feel like I could have in the kind of career arc that I had recently. So I got to see the modern data stack evolve in its very, very early days. And it made me not want to start a technology company in the space, but to actually start a consulting company in the space, like leverage all of the experiences that I had at the very beginning of my career. I started out as a consultant at Deloitte, and it's funny. Most people there's a lot of consultants in the world, but the startup world and the consulting world don't really overlap that much.
Okay.
And so it was, I think, very fortunate that I was able to, know how to write an SOW, understand how to create a consulting model that had, all the different, consulting is typically a pyramid and you have a, blah, blah, blah. So I knew how to do all of that stuff, at least moderately well. And that was honestly the goal at the outset, and DBT and its trajectory have been kind of a, mostly pleasant upside to that kind of base case scenario.
Okay, no, I completely agree. And I'm so curious, when you were talking about you were kind of at the precipice of the modern tech stack, what was that modern tech stack and what was that tech stack before? What did it look like?
So when I talk about the modern data stack, I talk about this as a kind of a 10-year period between 2013 to 2023. I think that we're actually out of this phase now. I think we're in this kind of new standards in AI era for data. But I think of the modern data stack as the rise of cloud, starting with Amazon Redshift, moving into Snowflake and BigQuery and Databricks and others. And then a whole ecosystem was built around this, ways to load data in, ways to transform data once it was in the cloud, and that's primarily DBT, and then ways to analyze it once it's been transformed. And so all of that was kind of taking shape as I was at RJ Metrics, and it was in fact what eventually caused RJ Metrics to fall off of its exponential growth curve. And so you tend to be very aware of what is causing you to lose deals when you're at a startup.
Yeah.
And so I got to watch it from there. And then I got to use the technology and fell in love with it.
That's amazing. And you're now saying that we're in this new phase with AI. What does this AI tech stack look like?
Well, so I am not an insider when it comes to AI. I don't have strong opinions on the AI industry overall, but I will say that when I think about these big eras I'm thinking about them from a data industry perspective.
Yeah.
And so the three big eras that have occurred as I've been in the industry were Hadoop and the rise of the public cloud, which is 2008 to maybe 2016, maybe you could be a little more generous in 2018, something like that. And then the modern data stack and the rise of the cloud data platform. And that's 2013 to 2023, something like that. And then I would say the next era in data is defined by the combination of AI and standards. And so when I think about that, we could talk about AI for a long time, but maybe let me just start real quick with the standards part of that. For a very, very long time, for basically the entirety of the data ecosystem, the primary business model was lock-in, vendor lock-in.
Mm-hmm.
You get people to load data into your platform or code workloads into your platform, then you force them to use the compute and storage that's a part of that platform, and then they're kind of stuck. That's
Yeah.
like where they are. And you're now starting to see standards emerge like Iceberg, and I think soon to be like the DBT Fusion engine that we launched as of this recording yesterday. But if we just stick on Iceberg for a second, because Fusion's like a whole nother topic, Iceberg allows companies to store their data once and have many different data platforms all access that same data and have guarantees about how well they can interact with it. And that's freaking hard. And it also really like completely reshapes the business model for the entire industry. And I think we're only starting to see the impacts of that. Okay, so that's the standards part. The AI part is, I mean, depends on how deep you want to go here, but one, I think that the actual work of data is changing, like what it means to be a data analyst, who does the work of analytics, what it means to be a data engineer, who does that work, what tools you use. All of this stuff is like completely changing.
Yeah.
Very quickly. And then also because data is upstream of AI, there's this new massive use case for all of the data that we are all producing. And it might be the biggest use case yet, like significantly more impactful than like a dashboard.
Ooh, so you have opened up the door to a lot of different ways that we can take
Yes, I
this.
know. I'm
I know,
sorry.
no, I love this because so much to learn and so much to dive in here. We will be talking about how AI is changing work, but you also mentioned DBT Fusion. So congratulations on that new launch.
Thank you.
It's described as probably the most like significant in DBT's history. Can you elaborate on how Fusion redefines the developer experience and what it means to the future of data transformation?
Yeah. So I will get into the details there, but let me just share some context. DBT Core for a very long time, since 2016, has been a Python-based project. It is licensed under Apache 2. It's a permissive open source license. And we have built a commercial business on top of that. And that commercial business is going pretty well. We publicly stated that we grew from $2 to $100 million in revenue over the course of like 3.5, 4 years. So going well. Uh, there are a lot of open source companies out there. Everyone's a little bit of a snowflake. No, there's no two open source companies that are exactly identical, but there are patterns. One of the patterns that I have become super, super aware of is this pattern where the open source project starts with a certain set of technical bones. And maybe it grew up as an internal project at some big company. Maybe it came from a research lab, whatever. It doesn't matter. But it came from some like very humble beginnings. And then a lot of people found it useful. And all of a sudden, like a large community grew up around it. And if you go ask those original people who built that thing, did you anticipate this level of usage? Almost universally, the answer that they will give you is like, hell no. And if I had anticipated that level of usage, I would have made some different design decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so what sometimes happens, and my favorite two examples are Confluent, which is the company that maintains Kafka, and Databricks, which is the company that the founders originally wrote Apache Spark. They have both completely rebuilt the open source engines behind those ecosystems. So Databricks has a thing called Photon, which is a rewrite of Spark and C++, and Confluent has a thing called Cora, which is a protocol compatible thing that runs Kafka. And it just turns out that sometimes the technology that started the thing is not the technology that's going to allow you to scale to that next level. And sometimes you have to make the hard decision to kind of rewrite the whole freaking thing from scratch. And so that's what we did with Fusion. DBT Core has powered the DBT community to this point, and we're committed to continuing to maintain it indefinitely and continuing to extend it. But there are a bunch of stuff that DBT Core just can't do.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of biggest headlines right at the outset for Fusion are that it compiles. So it's totally written in Rust. Rust is a very high performance language, and even at the outset, without a ton of work put into optimization or anything like that, it can already compile DBT projects 30 times faster.
Whoa, okay.
And from a developer experience standpoint, that matters a lot. One of the comments yesterday in the launch chat was, when am I going to brew my tea now? There was this thing where people would execute DBT jobs as they were writing code, and they would walk away, go make themselves coffee, and come back a couple of minutes later, and DBT would be kind of doing its thing. And that's obviously not what you want. You want developer tooling that's like operates at the speed of your thought. And so that's the first big benefit of Fusion. The second one is that it has real deep SQL comprehension.
Okay.
Not like best effort, we'll make some good guesses, but like we truly are able to fully emulate the underlying database that this query is built to run against. And as a result, we're able to give you really, really detailed error messages. We're able to prevent you from executing against the underlying database and consuming a bunch of credits. If we know that there's a problem with your query, all of these wonderful developer experience benefits that come from actually understanding deeply the SQL that's inside the project. So those are kind of the two big ones at the outset. One of the ones that we are saving for our paying customers is that Fusion also, because it understands your DBT code so well, it can actually execute it more efficiently. And so on average, what we're seeing is that DBT projects that run through Fusion today run about 10% more efficiently.
Wow.
And that's a real number. That's like saving you money on your spend on your underlying platform. And we think that 10% number is going to go up pretty significantly over the coming months.
That's amazing. So it's cost effective for businesses. It understands your underlying like SQL code and the DBT code that it's also like running on, and it compiles it, you said 30 times faster initially.
That's right.
That's pretty cool. That's going to make some huge waves in the industry. And this new source available license, it aims to balance openness with commercial interest. How do you see this licensing model influencing the adoption of DBT and the broader open source community?
So the two big rewrites that I shared before, Photon and Kona, Cora, those are both proprietary software products that are sold by their maintainers. And that's great. That is a totally legitimate business model, obviously. And that was the default place that we started. We were like, okay. So a lot of the technology that goes into Fusion was actually a part of an acquisition that we did, a company called SDF that we announced back in January. And so our default assumption had been we're doing this big rewrite moment, and these benefits of this new engine are going to be things that our paying customers can get.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, there's a part of this that is business strategy, and there's a part of this that's just like, I'm here to help people in the world.
Yeah.
That we just thought that we could do more than that. And we wanted to find ways to give the benefits of this technology to the community and not just reserve them for paying customers. And so there's a mix of Apache 2 open source code and source available elastic license code and proprietary code that is in Fusion. And so the community can use big chunks of the functionality. And that's a lot of what we focused on giving to the community is amazing developer experience. Yeah. We want every single data engineer, analytics engineer to be able to have the best possible DBT developer experience. And a lot of the things that we are reserving for paying customers are things that are much more things that like you would imagine a CIO or CDO caring about, like PII and governance tracking, cost optimization, these kinds of benefits.
So this is all really exciting. This is so exciting for the community. And you mentioned data engineering and analytics. And earlier you talked about how there's going to be some major disruptions in those two job roles. Since they're undergoing these rapid transformations, especially with this integration with AI, how do you see these changes disrupting their traditional workflows?
So if you take the job of a data engineer, analytics engineer, and you Now, no, we all are aware that nothing is ever quite this simple. But if
Mhm.
you attempted to take the biggest buckets of time that these folks spend on different tasks, and you wrote down maybe the top 5, top 7, most of them would be about writing code, reading code, verifying code. It would be things associated with code.
Mhm.
And authoring new pipelines, extending existing pipelines, debugging problems in production. All of this is stuff that in a DBT world, at least, maps down to individual code files on disk. And we are very quickly getting to a place where AI is able to do all of those things as well as, if not better than, a human.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, pretty wonderful, because a decade ago, the job data engineer was one of the hottest jobs in tech. But honestly, I don't think the things that data engineers spend most of their time doing today are that fascinating. Like, it was really interesting the first time we got to play with some of this new tech.
Yeah.
But like, who needs to set up their 35th data ingestion script or stage the data? Like, it's just like not that intellectually stimulating to do some of these tasks. And so I think that what this will allow is that it will allow some of these folks to get closer to business problems
Mhm.
and actually like span the gap more effectively between solving real like ROI driving business problems and the data. And then it will allow some folks to go more to the, at least the way that I think about it in my head, towards the left, and be data platform people, build the systems that are in use to drive data engineering, rather than the individual pipelines, which can actually be done
Yeah.
really well with AI.
Okay, so I can see where you're going, and this is also aligned with where I thought these roles are going, and I completely agree. I've worked as a data engineer, analytics engineer, software engineer. For data engineering, like some of the work really isn't that like exciting. I did like it though when it got a bit monotonous, monot words
Yeah, yeah.
monotonous, and
It's like a little satisfying, right?
it's kind of satisfying where you just like you know exactly what you're doing. You're kind of like a little robot. So on the days when I'm like I don't actually want to think, I could just do
Mm-hmm.
that, and you could get into like a nice like flow with it, and that's what I really sometimes enjoyed. But I've also like worked on like business intelligence. I've also done consulting with startups and all this other stuff. So like when it comes to business decisions, I do see the need for those who work with actual data to better understand what drives those business goals, what increases revenue, and get more in tune with that. And it'll like I think a lot more data people need a seat at the table. And this AI coming in and integrating and this rapid transformation allows for that in some regards.
I think that and maybe I just to put it out on the table, I don't think that people who currently have the title data engineer are at any risk of being unemployed or anything like that. So please don't interpret anything that I'm saying
No.
from that perspective. But I do think that we all have a tendency to get very attached
Mm-hmm.
to seeing ourselves as the tasks that we perform and not the value that we provide. And that can lead to a certain level of defensiveness. And I think that there was a lot of justified AI defensiveness a year ago. The products actually were not fully there. But at this point, if you believe that you can create a straightforward data pipeline somehow better, faster, cheaper, more accurately than an AI, like that's not actually true anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be okay, because your business value is not that. When I was doing data consulting work for the first 3.5 years of Fishtown Analytics, it always did enough data engineering to get to the business decision and no more.
Yeah.
It is a means to an ends, not an ends in and of itself.
No, I agree. And especially with what you said, saying that data engineers are not going to be out of a job anytime soon. It's about the shifting of the job roles and making sure that they stay up to date to stay ahead to ensure that they don't lose their jobs in the future. So if they need to like go out and learn some sales strategy or business goals and business needs, I think that'll be a very valuable addition to what they already know.
Yes, totally. Or to actually go deeper technically
Mm,
and say, like, I mean, my favorite blog post in the history of data engineering was written by Jeff Magnuson, who at the time was at Stitch Fix, It's back in 2015. The title of the blog post was "Engineers Shouldn't Write ETL,"
Ooh.
and he just makes this impassioned argument for why that is not a good career decision for anyone with a data engineering title. And there's actually a ton of more valuable things for those folks to spend their time on. And this is well before we had AI writing code for anybody. And so even in the absence of AI, I think it wasn't like actually a great go forward kind of career decision. But now it's even more obvious that like you should be investing to the left in like getting more deeply technical, or to the right in getting more strategic.
No, I completely agree. Well, you're already very actually, I can't ask you this question because you're all already very business oriented and you're already also technical. So
I'm much less technical than I am business oriented, to
yeah,
be
you're
fair.
much less. Okay, so would you continue on in the path of like business?
I wish that my job gave me choices like that. I would love to fire myself and do, actually as we were seeing responses come in yesterday, I got the opportunity to set up our new VS Code extension, get Fusion up and running and play around with it. And that was great. I loved that, but my normal day-to-day does not allow me to spend a lot of time there.
It's okay. But you mentioned, so we've talked about AI and machine learning increasingly influencing data practices. How is DBT Labs integrating these technologies into its offerings? You talked about a Fusion engine being able to understand. I'm guessing that uses some AI involved in there.
No, actually,
No.
it's a great question. The way that software understands code has been consistent for basically as long as there has been software. We use compiler technology.
Okay.
And so at its heart, Fusion is a compiler, a SQL compiler, and it is going through the entire uh, process of compilation. It creates an AST, it creates a logical plan, it can translate that into a physical plan. It does the steps of compilation all the way down. It turns out that even AI relies on compilers to check its own work. So it's actually one of the big advances in the products from Anthropic and OpenAI recently, is that they've expanded their ability to do tool use. And one of the most important tools, so probably the browser's tool number one, but tool number two is compilers.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are using them to write a lot of code and they don't get it right the first time. And the funny thing is that that's actually okay, because humans don't get it right the first time either. And so what do humans do? They run their code against a compiler, they get an error message, and then they iteratively go through the process of break fixing it until they get the result that they're looking for. And so large language models in conjunction with compilers form the loop that you need to actually write accurate code with AI. And so there's actually never been a multi-dialect SQL compiler before. And what this enables data practitioners to do is to give their, among all the other benefits, but it gives them the ability to use this tool with their large language model so that their code can be first written by the large language model and then tested with the compiler, and then iteratively go through a process of bug fixing.
Wow, that's amazing. Are there any offerings that DBT Labs has that includes AI?
Yeah, so there's two ways that you can get access to this. There's the open source MCP, Model Context Protocol
Mm-hmm.
server that we shipped, I don't know, a month ago, something like that.
Okay.
MCP is kind of becoming the standard for tools to publish interfaces so that they can be used by large language models. And that's seen awesome uptick in usage since we first launched it. A lot of attention, and that's exciting. The other mechanism is for paying customers. Our entire DBT platform includes a feature called Copilot, which we like boring names. We wanted to figure out what to call this thing, and we said, what is the thing that everybody would understand if we called it that? And we said, well, DBT Copilot sounds about right. But so in basically every experience across the DBT platform, you now have a mechanism to write code with natural language instead of writing the code yourself. The one area of the product, and this is I have really want to get here very soon, but we currently don't have AI integrated into our production debugging process. And I so want to do that because data engineers spend so much time debugging failed production pipelines. And it's actually not rocket science. It just requires a lot of painstaking like research into a bunch of different things.
Mhm.
And I think that we will be able to, in the not distant future, create an experience where there's a failed production job. And by the time you get into the office in the morning, there's already a proposed PR it says like, hey, guess what? I looked into this failure. Here's the problem. Here's the code that fixes that problem. I ran it through all the CI checks. I think we're good to go. Take a look. Let me know what you think.
That sounds amazing. The amount of time saved. Oh my goodness.
I think this is very real. It's applying the right context and doing it with the right like guardrails around it.
No, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Sorry, my mind's blown just like thinking about that. It's like my morning coffee, like, oh no, something failed. Oh, this co-pilot is already like looking into it and like has a suggested PR. Now let me review the PR to make sure that they're taking consideration all the different things that they need to. So that would be a game changer for sure. Oh, I hope you guys get working on that. Just not
I'll put you on the launch announcement list.
please, thank you. I appreciate it. So when most people hear DBT Labs, they first think of community and that open source network that first started it. And it's the community-driven growth is often highlighted as like a key success factor of the DBT Labs. What strategies did you employ to foster such an engaged community? And how do you plan to maintain this momentum as the company scales?
So that's a really interesting formulation of the question. I don't feel like I've been ever asked exactly that version before, although lots of people want to know how to create a community like the DBT community. Here's my best guess, and a lot of this, like it's kind of an emergent property, and you would think that I would know how this happened, but actually it's like the butterfly effect. You actually aren't sure, even if you're the one that kind of kicked things off. I think communities can't be intentionally started. They have to hit a nerve. There's a lot of random chance. You can do things to put yourself in a good position, like you can build a great product that solves a great need, and that but I think to a certain extent, communities are emergent and uncontrollable. What you can do, though, is you can destroy communities. And so a lot of the art of community building is attempting to, I use the word steward a lot, is to effectively steward something that seems to be going well. And that requires deep user empathy. It requires operating with a set of values that sometimes are in tension with what you need to do to become a successful commercial company. So that's hard. How do you both have the kind of drive and determination to win that is required in capitalism, but the kind of softer side of empathy and kindness and helpfulness that is required to be a good steward of an open source community? I was talking about the launch yesterday. Anytime you create change, you're going to have reactions across the spectrum. There's some people who love change and are like, hell yeah, let's go. I'm ready. There's some people who are nervous. They're like, what are the details? I don't totally get it. And then there are some people who really don't like change, and they tend to see evil boogeymen all around them and that assume that any change is, somebody out to get them. And the hard thing is, how do you see every person and where they're at and not feel like, even if this person is saying something either neutral or negative, they're coming from a place that, like, you have to understand what's behind that reaction.
Yeah.
And how do I respond to that thing, that place that they're in? And I think that I'm super proud of the work that folks throughout our company did yesterday in responding to community members, both like in the DBT community proper and like on LinkedIn and other places. It's a mindset, and I think that you have to figure out how to indoctrinate large groups of people with that mindset for it to work.
No, I agree. And that was very insightful because it's true. You can't just start a community. It's about timeliness. It's about relevance. It's about them seeing the benefits and then them telling like others like, hey, you should try this out. And like, it has to glow like naturally. And I like what you said, where it can't be like communities can be built, but they can be destroyed. Like that's powerful. And it's crazy true. But as the CEO of a rapidly growing tech company, what leadership's principles guide you in navigating this complexities of scaling, maintaining those communities, that innovation, and maintaining your overall company culture?
We have a set of leadership principles that we use internally. My favorite one, we just had a conversation about this internally. My favorite one is we are owners, which seems a little, I don't think that's a great answer for me here, because I started the damn thing, and of course I feel like an owner. I do think that it is true. It is my favorite leadership principle, because I think so much flows from feeling accountability for the entire overall thing, whether that's financial results or customer impact, or the impacts that we make on employees' lives, and all of it. Like it is a big responsibility to have in people's lives, and sometimes we don't like to think about that because it is such a big, overwhelming responsibility. But I think that it leads to better outcomes if everyone fully processes, here's how much my work actually matters. The thing that maybe also a boring answer, but our first value that we've had since founding is we are a mission-driven company.
Mm-hmm.
And, I am very fortunate. I've been much more successful over the last 9 years with Fishtown Analytics, DBT Labs, than I had ever imagined. And so it's really important to me to always center back on what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
And that is what keeps me focused every morning when I get out of bed.
Tristan, you are surprising me. This is our first time meeting and talking, but just hearing you talk about the responsibilities you feel as a leader to your team, to even to the overall community, it's beautiful because, as you know, great CEOs, and there are the CEOs where you're like, oh my gosh, you're kind of ruining my own morale coming into work every single day because I know you don't care about me. And you are even hearing you speak right now, I feel it. I feel the truth. I feel the empathy. I feel that humanness behind your words. So I'm just there are good CEOs out there. They're great ones.
I appreciate you saying that. I don't know that my experiences are a playbook or representative or anything like that, but I do think I've been working with a coach now for a long time, and I think I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I still do, but I especially at the beginning of my time as a CEO, I had a lot of imposter syndrome about what does it look like for me to do this job? Because I've worked for plenty of CEOs before, and I guarantee you my version of this job isn't going to look anything like theirs. And yet I felt this kind of need to conform with this kind of common expectation of what a CEO kind of looks or feels like. And it's taken a lot of years of working with a coach to figure out what's my answer to how to do this job.
Yeah. You have to do it your way. You have to do what feels natural and true to yourself. And this seems true to you.
I hope so.
Yeah. Now, are there any particular challenges or opportunities that excite you about the future, where the future of tech, the future of DBT Labs, that's open-ended for you to take wherever you want?
Well, for the company, we certainly have a lot to prove over the next 12 months. The new technology that we've launched into the public is in beta. We have a lot of work to get it to a place where everyone in the community can use it, and it is exclusively preferable to the engine that we shipped 9 years ago. I would say, this is too annoyingly Silicon Valley. So I live in Philadelphia, and I tried not to be a Silicon Valley conformist, but it's real hard to not pay attention to what's going on in AI today and have at least some level of concern about the forces shaping the industry. Things like alignment and the kind of race conditions, all of it is interesting. I believe in the promise of AI, and that if we navigate the next 10 to 20 years well, that this could be the unlock human flourishing that we have never before seen. I really truly do believe that. But there was an if statement in there, and it's a non-trivial if statement, is if we manage this well. And I won't say that I know exactly what it looks like to navigate it well. I think it's truly hard questions that we have to face, but I'm spending a lot of time thinking about that.
Exciting things ahead. And we're almost at time. We are at time, but I have 4 rapid fire questions.
Hit me.
Are you okay? If DBT Labs had a mascot, what would it be and why?
This is a bad mascot, but our logo is, some people call it the bit. It looks like a kind of a thing you could turn with a screwdriver or something like that. And somebody one time made a version of the bit that had a cowboy hat on it. And so, yeah, there's been attempts to turn it into a real mascot.
What hobby or interest of yours might surprise people?
I have really gotten into sailing over the last couple of years. I have a beaten up old 14-foot sunfish that I love to take out on the Chesapeake Bay. And there's nothing that makes me happier than a gusty day.
If you weren't in tech, what career path might have you pursued?
I don't know, something something in the world of like banking / consulting, and I would probably be much more miserable than I am today.
What's a book or movie that significantly influenced your leadership style?
A Reboot by Jerry Colonna.
Reboot. Okay, I'm gonna add that to my list.
Jerry was my first exposure at a distance to CEO coaching, and his company Reboot is the first coaching group that I ever worked with. So it's very impactful.
That's great. I'm gonna check that out. Well, Tristan, thank you so much for your time. I really had a great conversation.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.